Welcome back to the Good Vibes podcast. If you're new here and this conversation adds value, consider sharing it forward. It helps us keep building this village. Today's guest is someone who helped shape the very language of performance before biohacking was even a buzzword. Abel James is a New York Times bestselling author, host of one of the longest running and most downloaded health podcasts of all time, a coach who turned a grandpa into a fat-burning beast on national TV, and a musician whose tracks have topped the charts on VR music platforms. But what makes Abel especially relevant to this village isn't just his credibility. It's how he's used media, music, and mindset to build a regenerative engine around health sovereignty. Let's dive in. Abel, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm stoked to be here. Let's go.
Nice.
With all those guitars behind you, I'm excited to jam.
Heck yeah, man. Let's get after it. So most people know you for the fat burning man brand or the wild diet, but they may not realize how long you've been building this village yourself. Can you walk us through the through line from early music to paleo effects to now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long and windy journey for sure, but I was actually kind of raised with one foot in the world of alternative health when as a small child, I got pneumonia and a few other severe reactions and allergic reactions to all sorts of various drugs and procedures that I was subjected to as a kid. So I became, as an infant, essentially allergic to most antibiotics. And my mom had already been a trained nurse and later a trained nurse practitioner, but she started looking deeply into holistic medicine and using plants to heal and wildcrafting and that whole thing. And then, of course, skip ahead a few years. I'm going through school, I learned that there's a better way, and that, that kind of started in high school. I started drifting away from that way of thinking because I had been exposed as well to macrobiotic eating. I trained for a while with some really elite level. I wasn't elite, but mountain bike cross country racers who lived close by. So this idea that like nature can heal and that nature should be the source of food and sustenance and also a paradigm for how to live and build a society, that whole thing was lost on me as I went to high school and then college. And after I went to college, I was trying to pay off my loans as quickly as possible. So I started working in consulting and got excellent health insurance for the first time, which allowed me to kind of pick and choose the best doctors in my area. And so I did, and peed in a cup and got my blood drawn every couple of weeks, and followed my doctor's advice, which was to prevent family history of, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, and various yada, yada, yada things that most people have. I was eating very, very low dietary cholesterol, running 30 plus miles a week, avoiding red meats, and a bunch of other things. And over the course of 18 months, I put on 20 or 30 pounds. He had me on 4 or 5 different prescriptions. All my numbers were getting worse. I developed high triglycerides, high cholesterol numbers that were all out of whack and all these other things. And my thyroid essentially stopped working. So when that didn't work, I looked back into that alternative world and found even more about fasting and cyclic ketogenic dieting. So this is all about like 15, 20 years ago. I was in my early 20s when my health fell apart. And so when I was able to put it back together, doing basically the opposite of what my fancy schmancy, well-paid doctors had told me, I was so annoyed by that I decided to kind of start my own grassroots brand, a variety of brands. And having worked in consulting, I also learned, as we were working on one of the projects with schools and after school programs, I learned that food was basically the most significant lever that you could use to improve kids' outcomes in schools, to get them to show up and then perform better because their brains work better when they're nourished. So with that ammunition and knowledge, I just ran with it, started a blog, later a podcast, writing books, apps, that whole thing. And so that's where all these silly names come from: Wild Diet, Fat Burning Man, Caveman Feast, and all the other ones that are coming next.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's obvious, you've been around since before biohacking became a buzzword. What's the biggest myth or misfire you're seeing right now in the performance space?
I think the overemphasis on numbers without action, and also the tendency to think that more numbers are better, and that overemphasizing an increasing part of your day in your mental RAM, dedicating it to trying to live a long time, is burning up more energy than it's giving you. For a lot of people, it's causing anxiety. It's causing a loss of joy in daily living, and otherwise, things that could be very good. Because so I'm writing my next book about longevity, and have met up with a lot of people in the space, including Brian Johnson, like 3 times. I've hung out with him in the past, like, just few months even. And so there are a lot of different ways of thinking about this. And I respect everyone taking their own path. We need people kind of just like climbing weird mountains and forging new paths, for sure. But most people are kind of getting lost in the hype and the gimmicks, which tend to draw the most attention. But the things that get the best results tend to be the most boring things that are really small on a daily basis, but that add up to extraordinary results when they compound over the course of many days. Whether you're talking about strength training, or increasing your VO2 max, or just talking about grip strength, or the ability to get up and down out of a chair, like, all of these things can be trained for and improved. But for most people, you follow the standard story, and we start degenerating in our 20s, 30s, even sooner than that, we're seeing for some of us. So it's very important that we not think about all of the magic bullets and all the gimmicks, but focus as soon as we can on the small wins, like waking up and making sure that you're hydrating right away with good, clean water, that you're going for walks around meal times, that you're getting sunlight exposure when the sun is out, and that you're not blasting yourself with artificial light all night long and just like doom scrolling, that whole thing. We know a lot of things are bad for us. We do it anyway. So the trick is finding ways to make these little tweaks in your lifestyle and making them fun and innocuous and silly and not intimidating, because you have to fail, and a lot of us as results oriented adults, we just want to keep like winning and never have anyone see less from us, right? Like, we don't want to see our heroes be vulnerable and fall, and that sort of thing. And we don't want to be vulnerable and fall in front of others. But when you take a new path like this, you have to make mistakes. You have to make a terrible dinner for other people a few times before you make it a decent one, so having that childlike sensibility is important as you enter a new lifestyle and start tweaking your day-to-day practices. But that's what it takes.
So let's jump from there directly into this concept of musical neuroplasticity. You've written about this in The Musical Brain, the idea that musical practice shapes cognition. Why is music such a powerful tool for mental health and longevity and even leadership?
Yeah, so a lot of people who have been familiar with training in music, or even just listening to it, are familiar with the fact that it lights up your brain, different aspects of the brain that we're not normally using. And so there are so many different reasons why this is good. But basically, I try to think of it as like, we'll take our body for a walk and we might exercise our body. This is like exercise for the brain. It keeps your brain nimble. It trains you for focus. And so in a modern world that's just full of distractions and most of our energy is kind of siphoned away and exploited, I think it's very important to focus, to train for focus, so you like do everything you can to optimize for the state of focus for a portion of the day, to train your body to get into that state of flow on a regular basis. So if you can do that with music, you can start applying it to other areas of your life. So not everyone has to double down on music as I have. I'm, for example, not a great dancer, but I would love to build that capacity as well, because these things are all kind of exercising multiple senses at the same time, connecting parts of our brain. We see that whether you're talking about the developing brain of children or the brain that degenerates over time in people who have Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, that sort of thing, music is this through line that allows people to overcome many developmental issues, including autism and that sort of thing. There are many exercises like eurythmics that historically have been used to help kids perform better and their brains to work better when they can move their bodies out in synchronized fashion to music. So they don't even have to be playing. They can just be kind of like dancing around to it for this to work. Same thing with people who are older. A lot of times they'll lose the capacity for speech, but they can still, if someone sings with them a song from childhood, they can still sing and remember all of the words. I've experienced this in my own family, as people before they pass had lost that capacity for speech. And it's just like, it brings up goosebumps when I think about it. It's like such a special thing that is easy to miss out on if you just kind of doom scroll all day and do the thing that everyone else is doing, which is, no judgment once more, but we do have to kind of like put our shields up and fight for our own space to do things like paint, draw, journal, make music, that whole thing, because that's what keeps our brain healthy over the long term. And as soon as you stop doing these things, the brain kind of starts to atrophy.
You coached Kurt Morgan on national TV. 87 pounds lost in 14 weeks. Top performer in fitness and fat loss. What did that experience teach you about what actually creates change?
It was so interesting because for the most part, I'd been pretty hands off with most of the people who I'd worked with, because coaching isn't something that I was never a personal trainer. I've always been more of a, blogger, writer, podcaster who's very curious about this and writes about this and helps people as I can, usually from afar. So we've had group coaching communities, and I've helped just like a handful of people, like on a usually special case basis, one-on-one type thing for the more intensive deal. So like some musicians and artists and other creative types I've worked with intensively. But Kurt was very unique because he didn't come from the world of health and didn't come from like having the necessity that an actor might have before a big film where they need to be in shape, or a touring musician who needs to stay in shape and get ready for their next tour. Like those people have a unique challenge, but are also kind of aligned with the world. It's for work. It's for their job. So like they can hire a guy who can help them do that. It like all makes sense. When you have like a regular guy with a regular job, pretty much, grandpa, kids running around, lots of responsibilities, lots of health issues, who's just not concerned about health. And in fact, has kind of given up. Like that's how he got to 352 pounds when I got with him. That's a completely different mental space and a very different challenge for someone like me coming in, who's been a health nut for a long time and just like has been living this for a long time. So it was really all about like finding that middle ground as people, where it's like, how can I help make this worth it for you, Kurt? And fortunately, we developed really good rapport and trust kind of like early in the process. I didn't put him through any gauntlets. Like some people were, other coaches were camping out in front of the houses of the people who they were coaching, just like really up on them, like come out at 4:30 in the morning, getting them to go for a run and stuff like that. I was not like that at all. I was like, man, I'm here for you as much as you need, but this is your thing and I can't do any of this for you. I could tell you what works, and I know, and like, given what has happened in front of me and what I've helped coach some people through and what's happened in my own body and my own health over the years, like I could tell you this is worth it, man. And it doesn't have to be a slog. You can still eat really well. You can even eat your bacon and eggs, man. You can have some steak. We can make some homemade desserts. I'm going to be eating the same way as you as we go. I'll be eating more than you probably, but this will be something where it's like, I'm not just putting on a show here. This is our actual life. We live this. It's not some crazy diet or that sort of thing. And so he was on board, and I think it really helped as well that he got fast results, right? It happened quickly. I think the first week it was either 11 or 15 pounds he was down. And he's an enormous man. He's much taller than I am. He's like 6'4", 352 pounds as we start. So a lot of this is water weight, but water weight counts too, especially at the beginning. It's good for getting momentum for people. Now, you don't want to do any of this too quickly. It's losing a lot of weight really, really quickly is not good for most people. For Kurt, though, I saw this as an opportunity for like, he was a walking heart attack. Like he had severe metabolic dysfunction when I saw him, like, and he wanted to be around for his grandkids. And this is an opportunity where he gets insane amounts of attention and support for a very small amount of time, where essentially he didn't have to pay me to be there. But he got access to be as a coach. So he used it, put it into action, took it very seriously, was skeptical at first, then started getting this incredible result in terms of like how his body was changing, but also found that he wasn't dragging. Like he wasn't low on energy as he was expecting. In fact, he had more energy than when he was shoveling his face with ice cream and all these burgers and fries and all this other stuff, because finally his blood sugar was starting to normalize and his metabolism was starting to get going again. So that was a really exciting thing to not only like see from him and experience up close, but also to see what that did down the line for a lot of other people who saw that as their food, like first proof of concept for fasting, eating red meat for health. Like a lot of these things had never been talked about in the public consciousness, at least like in the TV sphere, that space. So I was really surprised that I was allowed to say a lot of these things and do a lot of these practices, but I think I only was because they thought that we were going to fail spectacularly. They thought there was no way that this would work. In fact, though, this is based on a lot of sound science, and now we're seeing that it has, many people have gotten the memo, I'm happy to say, over the past 10 years for sure. You see a lot of people who have taken their health into their own hands by getting rid of the ultra processed food, and usually not being quite so afraid of pastured meats and that approach. And certainly the uptake in regenerative farming and kind of new language, even around some of these practices, is really exciting. I don't love that some of it's getting more political than it was, but it's a part of the process. And I think we're making really good progress. It's not perfect. We got more work to do, but we're definitely making good progress in the past few years and months, especially.
Yeah, you've invested in Oura, LMNT, Primal Kitchen, Serenity Kids. What do you look for in a brand before backing, and how do you see the role of media and education in driving adoption?
Yeah, it's so important to have people aligned with what you stand for. Um, of course, you can grow businesses in other ways, and there's nothing wrong either with businesses that kind of sell widgets or just the normal corner store. But if you're talking about a startup that you want to turn into the next unicorn, it really needs to represent something. And like, I think Element is a good example of that, where it's kind of tongue in cheek. You're doing the thing that most people said that you shouldn't be doing, which is having more salt. Like, you're supposed to be dialing that down. And then you see all of these health nuts and athletes just like crushing salt, having it on purpose. And with a line like "you get salty" and kind of like the merch around that. Also, the business model is really important. It's certainly easier to scale some CPG type businesses than others. And so if you're dealing with things like refrigeration or really advanced or complex formulations, or multiple SKUs, all this stuff, this complexity can really be a drag on scale. So there are a lot of different lessons that you can learn from some of these brands, but all in all, I'll just offer that when I was coming up in consulting, we had a couple of free lunches where the financial advisors come in, right? And they tell you how it's supposed to work when you invest in the typical way that people invest, the S&P or the Dow Jones companies, that whole thing, index funds. And like, even back then, I didn't think that I should take the money that I earned and like dedicated my life to, in a certain like life power, life energy, whatever, and then just like plonk it right into Coca-Cola or like some company that I don't believe in, right? And so even if that would have been a better investment, which it wouldn't have been, by the way, compared to a lot of these other ones that I've made, it really wouldn't have, especially when you take them all into account. There's something about when you have assets or where you have some financial capital to moving it into a place that you're philosophically aligned with, where you're not just like rooting for them because it's going to make money at the expense of the world, or because they're exploiting people or making the health situation worse. Like, this is active, we're investing in a baby food company, not to make billions of dollars, but because the baby food companies are broken. And I've met Serenity and the team, and they're doing a great job. And I believe in that. And so, in some cases you can make your money back. In other cases, you might risk it all and lose it. And in others, you might make a small fortune. And hopefully in aggregate, if you can do enough of these deals, as I've been fortunate enough to do over the years, you'll find that like, it's not always predictable. It's not always easy, but you can do capitalism differently than the way that the financial advisors and everyone else tells you to do it. Like, we haven't made a vast fortune by any means, but we certainly had a lot of success doing things that people have told us could not be done in the world of finance and investing. And so I would encourage other people, entrepreneurs, builders, investors, to like double down on the philosophical side of these things and just get away from making money for money's sake or making money off of money. That whole debt-based system, I think, is actually in jeopardy in the next few years. And so we need to really look at the companies and the people who are doing great work that are improving the world for the next generation.
What are the horizons looking like? And when we look at things like AR and I'm sorry, AI and VR, you mentioned earlier the doom scrolling effect and stuff, this dopamine addiction being on the rise in general in this new digital world. What are your thoughts on how do we stay grounded? I mean, what are the small non-negotiable rituals that maybe you use to stay alive?
I was in a pretty gnarly car accident at the beginning of the summer. And so I had wiggle room before that, but after I really didn't. And I haven't I'm still recovering because I got rear-ended in a hit and run. It was pretty high speed. So I herniated some discs, tore some ligaments and other stuff with my back, all that. So I made sure as soon as I could and was well rested enough to wake up and see the sunrise every day. And this was during the summer. So it was like a little bit earlier, a little bit easier, but aligning your circadian clock to make sure that you're going to bed as early as you can to kind of like get your melatonin and cortisol in check. Boy, that's a big one that most people miss these days because it's just so easy to stay on devices and your phone and other things like that. But if you're doing that after the sun goes down, and which I also do sometimes, to be perfectly clear, I'm not perfect by any means, but I do the best that I can and wear blue blockers, that whole thing. Basically, when that wiggle room was taken away because I had a bad concussion that I was recovering from as well, it's like, man, now I really can't get away with this. Like I'm trashed for a couple of days if I try to stay on a computer too long, that whole thing. So being hypersensitive to some of these little things that all of us usually get away with, in a way has helped me learn a lot more about what's damaging and what's not, what you can get away with. And largely, I would just say the gift of a lot of this technology is that you can kind of just turn it off and get away from it, right? There's always that option. And so as fun and as exciting as it sometimes seems to be, like ask yourself, is it giving you more energy than it's taking? And sometimes it does. Sometimes it's fun to watch a silly little video of a cat playing piano or just like silly animal things or whatever it is that you like to do. But most of the time you stay on a little bit too long. You get down that rabbit hole, or you just, you find yourself comparing yourself to others on Instagram or to TikTok and that whole thing. And so the best weapon against all of this will always be, take a break, take a vacation, take a nice long, I think one of the reasons saunas work so well, honestly, is because people can't be on their phones in the sauna. They're taking a minute to breathe. They're taking a minute to just like calm down, and they're not constantly going after that cortisol, dopamine cycle. And so I think that's the big takeaway, is that it only has power over you as long as you stay engaged with it. As soon as you disengage, like you kind of get your own agency back. So the power in your own life comes from trying to do that, whether, you put something in your calendar that says like between 3:45 and 4:15, I'm just going to take a minute. There's nothing in this calendar. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go take a little quiet time, a nap, whatever it is. Like that's, I think, what we're all going to have to do, because only like cooler and cooler technology will keep coming out. Like it's going to be more and more of a draw, especially for the younger generations who are more accustomed to it. Like it's only going to become more addictive. So we have to do what we can now to like build up the analog world and also find ways to reward ourselves, to remember that like being outside and going for a walk by the water in the sunshine with someone we love and having a conversation is better than watching endless Netflix shows. But we do have to trick our minds to like get there and do that. It's hard to do that. It's hard to wake up and watch the sunrise, but it's worth it.
What are you most excited to build next, and how can people plug into what you're building?
Definitely doubling down on the community aspect of things. And I'm bullish on real people these days, as opposed to just kind of social media acquaintances, fake bots, that whole world, which honestly I've been a part of and has been very, very useful for scaling my own projects and meeting and reaching a lot of people in the years past. I'm very keen on smaller things, local things, and real people getting together and having conversations offline about how we can build real solutions coming next. So as I mentioned, I'm writing a new book about longevity and launching some new brands around that, but it's all kind of a slow burn because I kind of consider it life's work and certainly a passion project. And so we'll be really looking forward to doing retreats, live events, collaborations, partnerships. So if anyone is kind of into the same world and wants to build cool things, I would love to get in touch and meet up or talk about it.
That's awesome. If you got something from today's episode, hit follow, drop a comment, or send it to somebody who's walking a similar path. Till next time, stay strong, stay sharp, stay aligned, and keep up the good vibes. Thanks so much, Abel, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.